Do you love heroes? Do you believe in miracles? Well, I hope you do, because you're going to be seeing a lot of that in today's video. In a world where penguins can take flight and glowing fish can grant people superhuman abilities, comes a young girl who has the ability to walk through solid objects. She will embark on a quest to save Tokyo from Two-Face and his team of espers. A young boy is outside a shopping mall holding an umbrella. His friend bursts out of the mall like he just ran a marathon and apologizes with candy. They start walking away together. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a bunch of shiny fish start flying around. Yes, you heard that right, flying fish. It's like someone accidentally left the aquarium door open and turned on the fans. As if that isn't weird enough, a building decides to join the fun. But not just any building. A building floating mid-air like it's on a vacation from gravity. A voice from inside the building declares the start of a new era. At this point, the boys are probably wondering if they accidentally walked into a sci-fi movie set, or if they should start looking for hidden cameras. The voice, trying his best to sound all dramatic, introduces himself as an esper and declares that espers will now rule Tokyo. The boy with the booming voice from the floating building then strolls into a mansion where Tokyo's leaders are having a super serious meeting discussing espers. He basically puts them all under his charge. Meanwhile, his followers are busy causing more chaos around the city. Cars and trains are under attack, making the city look like it's hosting a demolition derby. Tokyo is in a state of utter confusion. The citizens are told to evacuate to safe zones, which sounds like a fancy term for run and hide until the grown-ups fix things. Everyone's scrambling, probably wishing they had stayed home to binge-watch their favorite shows instead of dealing with flying fish and floating buildings. A news reporter, trying to stay calm while the city is giving the vibe of a scene from a disaster movie, gives a situation report on the events in Tokyo. She announces that the nation's only hope lies with the white-haired girl and her crew. Because, of course, every crisis needs a mysterious hero with unique hair. A few minutes after the reporter drops this bombshell, a helicopter is seen zooming toward the National Diet Building. Given that the building is currently the hottest spot in town for all the wrong reasons, she assumes it must be the white-haired girl swooping in to save the day. You know when you order takeout and see the delivery guy pull up, but instead of pizza, it's a badass hero coming to save everyone. When the news reaches the guy who attacked Tokyo's leaders, the girl with him, who teleports into the helicopter, expecting to find the white-haired girl. Instead, she finds a bunch of soldiers, probably just as surprised as you are when you open the fridge and realize someone ate your leftovers. She angrily takes them out and causes the helicopter to crash. Before Teleportation Girl, aka Minami, can leave the scene, she's ambushed by two Special Forces agents. These guys throw everything at her, almost as if they are trying to swat a fly with a noodle, totally useless. Just as Minami gears up for round 2 against the Special Forces agents, her boss calls her back. He's like, "Chill out, Minami. No need to rush. The white-haired girl will show up sooner or later." It's like when you tell your friend to calm down because the main act at a concert hasn't started yet. Elsewhere, a little girl tells her mom not to worry because the white-haired girl will come and save them. Outside the building, another girl named Murasaki reunites with her friend Ayumu. Both of them are espers, and they start chatting about the white-haired girl, whose real name is Rinka. They're expecting her to show up any moment to save the day, like waiting for a superhero to crash a boring party. Meanwhile, Murasaki uses her power of psychometry to quietly save people without getting noticed. It's like being a superhero ninja saving the day without the flashy moves. She discovers that the evil espers plan to drop the National Diet Building in a spot that will cause even more chaos. Great. Just what the city needs. A flying building turned wrecking ball. Ayumu rushes towards the building to save his mom, but doesn't get far before he turns back to save the little girl who was talking about Rinka earlier. Then, an esper from the evil side shows up and plants a bomb, just to add to the drama. She also creates a shield so no one can get through to defuse it. It was as if she put up a giant "Do Not Disturb" sign, only with way more explosive consequences. Ayumu and Murasaki try to break into the shield but fails. Kohushi arrives and saves the day with a massive punch. And just when no one was expecting, Rinka makes a grand entrance with a skull-smashing kick. Rinka keeps fighting those pesky evil espers, all while telling her wild story. She starts by saying she never believed in miracles, Well, not until she had one of those life-changing encounters you see in movies. Flashback to the past. It's the first day Rinka woke up with her new powers. She crashes through her neighbor's ceiling like an over-enthusiastic Santa Claus, landing smack in their apartment. And guess what? She's completely naked. Talk about making an entrance. Rinka freaks out, grabs a towel. Once she's home, she catches a look at herself and realizes her hair has gone full-on white. She went from a regular girl to a whole new character overnight. Rinka decides it's time to call her dad, probably thinking, Dad's gotta have some answers, right? She reaches for her phone, but it slips right through her hands and hits the floor. She tries to pick it up, but instead of grabbing it, she starts sinking into the floor. It was almost as if the ground had turned into human quicksand. Out of nowhere, a young guy teleports into her room like he's auditioning for a magic show. He tells her to focus or she'll end up in her neighbor's apartment again, hopefully this time with clothes on. The young man starts explaining the weirdness. Apparently, her new superpowers are thanks to an encounter with a school of shining fish. Rinka had been admiring the fish, not realizing one decided to make her its new home. The young man was there the whole time. Meanwhile, Rinka's dad wakes up at work to a bunch of frantic voice notes from his daughter. He bolts out of the shop like he just remembered he left the oven on and races home to find Rinka. Elsewhere, Rinka is pedaling her bike with the young man clinging to the back like an overpacked backpack. They're headed to the hospital to figure out what the heck is going on with her. On the way, her dad calls her on the phone and she changes route. She overhears her dad's unmistakable scream. She looks over and sees him, realizing he's also an Esper. He's magnetizing cars left and right, creating a giant car ball around himself. One would think he's trying to build the world's weirdest transformer. Rinka's dad is totally clueless about his new powers and has zero control. He's standing there in the middle of a car magnet mess, looking as confused as someone who walked into the wrong Zoom meeting. Rinka decides to save her dad by using her powers to slip into the cars. The young man follows her lead and teleports them all to a different part of town. They were all giving the vibe of some kind of superpowered Uber driver. When Rinka and her dad finally get back home, she ties him down and tells him not to leave the house. On her way to work, she pedals past some policemen investigating the scene where she saved her dad. She overhears them saying one of the culprits was a lady with white hair. Rinka speeds past them on her bike, hoping they don't notice her suspiciously matching description. Rinka arrives at her workplace where she serves as a waiter. And guess who she finds there? The young man from earlier, sitting like he owns the place. Before long, the two policemen from the crime scene stroll into the restaurant, asking about a suspect who's been swiping jewelry all over the city. Rinka immediately suspects Azuma and decides she'll catch him before the cops do. She sneaks into the building the police have marked as the next target. But just as she's about to pounce, she bumps into Azuma. After a comedic moment of, "I thought you were the thief." They realize Azuma isn't the one stealing the jewelry. Rinka and Azuma team up to catch the real thief, working together like a mismatched buddy cop duo. They hand the actual culprit over to the police, who probably had no idea what just happened. After the dust settles, Azuma turns to Rinka and asks her to join him in upholding justice in the city, like a superhero team-up invitation straight out of a comic book. So our jewelry thief wakes up in the hospital like it's a Monday morning after a wild weekend. She takes one look around and decides, "Nah, not today," and promptly knocks out two police officers. Guess they weren't ready for her version of a wake-up call. As soon as she steps out the door, she's greeted by a bunch of shady guys who might as well be holding a sign that says, "Join our sketchy organization." Meanwhile, back at Rinka's apartment, her dad has figured out how to control his superpowers. And what does he do with this newfound ability? Help around the house, that's right. He's using superpowers to become the ultimate dad, because saving the world can wait until after the laundry is done. At school, Azuma meets up with Rinka in her class to discuss their big plans to become superheroes. But Rinka's not having it. She tells him she just wants to get back to normal life, because apparently, normalcy sounds way better than having super cool powers and saving the day. Go figure. Azuma, being the helpful guy he is, suggests they need to find a flying penguin, because naturally, when in doubt, look for a flying bird that can't fly. Rinka and Azuma pack their bags and head out on this wild goose chase, or should I say, penguin chase. When they finally get there, they find some guys trying to catch this elusive flying penguin. These guys must have missed the memo that penguins are supposed to be waddling, not flying. Anyway, the men managed to catch the penguin, and a little girl claimed the penguin is her best friend. Rinka and Azuma swoop in like superheroes, because that's what they were planning to be anyway, and save the girl and her feathered friend from these amateur kidnappers. The girl, who introduces herself as Murasaki, tells them that the penguin is her only friend. Apparently, when you're rich, you skip the dog and go straight for the exotic pet. Rinka and Azuma decide to escort Murasaki home, only to discover she's from a wealthy family. Because why wouldn't she be? Turns out, behind every flying penguin is a rich little girl with questionable pet choices. They all receive a warm reception from Murasaki's dad, who seems thrilled to meet his daughter's new friends. Because nothing says, "I'm glad you're here," like a gourmet meal laid out before you. Rinka and Azuma are busy stuffing their faces when trouble comes knocking. Literally. An organization, because every story needs a shady organization, barges in and demands Murasaki's dad hand over part of his territory. He refuses, obviously thinking he's in a cheesy mob movie, and before he can say, make them an offer they can't refuse, he's informed that Murasaki has been kidnapped. Classic villain movie. Meanwhile, our jewelry thief is back on the scene, and she's not in the mood for small talk. She attacks Rinka, gives her a good beating, and drags her back to her house. But wait, it gets better. She then sets the house on fire, just to add that extra flair of drama. Luckily, Rinka's dad, with his newfound superpowers, manages to escape the burning house in one piece. Because why have superpowers if you can't use them to save yourself from a classic movie-style house fire? Azuma, trying to play the hero, gets beaten to a pulp by another Esper and is warned to stay out of their way. So much for his superhero dreams. Rinka, though visibly injured, is determined to save Murasaki, because clearly a few bruises and burns aren't enough to stop her. Azuma, licking his wounds and desperate to redeem himself, teleports to where Murasaki is being held hostage. He finds himself in a fight with an Esper named Mariyama. Because what's a rescue mission without a dramatic showdown? Azuma manages to teleport Mariyama back to Rinka and her dad. Now, it's a real family reunion. Superpowers, injuries, villains, and all. Inside the hostage room, Murasaki is having a pity party, complaining about how powerless she feels and wishing she could be more useful. Just then, as if the universe has a twisted sense of humor, a fish flies into the room and zips right through her. Murasaki passes out. Outside, Rinka's dad, Urushiba, is ready to play the heroic dad role and insists Rinka stay behind while he and Azuma go rescue Murasaki, because of course he's the only one with a plan, except he's about to get knocked out by his own daughter. Rinka, clearly not in the mood for parental advice, decides to knock her dad out cold and orders Azuma to teleport her to the rescue site. Because when it comes to saving the day, who needs a sensible plan when you can just punch your way through it? Murasaki's father gathers all the guys in his household and drops the bombshell. He's going after Hutekada, the genius who thought kidnapping his daughter was a solid Friday night plan. Rinka decides to steal the spotlight and shows up first. Of course, because rescuing Murasaki from a kidnapper is apparently not something her dad should be trusted with. She dives straight into a brawl with Hutekada, who, by the way, must be the world's least subtle villain ever. The penguin decides it's time to channel its inner fish whisperer. It orders the shimmering fish inside Hooked to make a grand exit, and then just swallows it. Amid this chaos, the jewelry thief makes a run for it with a fish-shaped object, because of course it's not a proper heist unless you've got something that looks like it was stolen from a circus. Just when you think things couldn't get any more complicated, the professor shows up. And, naturally, during their epic showdown, Rinka's father, Urushiba, who clearly missed the "don't be a hero" memo, jumps in to save the thief. Obviously, rescuing thieves is the new trend in heroic parenting. So Murasaki's dad finally rolls up to Hutekada's hideout, only to find out that Murasaki has mysteriously vanished. Meanwhile, outside, the epic showdown continues. Hutekada's having a meltdown, complaining that the professor promised him world domination, but instead left him with a spectacularly empty promise and zero powers. Classic overpromising and underdelivering. Sounds like a bad online shopping experience, doesn't it? Then, one of the professor's ever-loyal espers decides it's mask removal time. Azuma takes one look and realizes that this masked figure is none other than Minami. So Minami, now officially the least subtle mask-wearing enthusiast, gives Azuma the classic villain ultimatum: stay out of my way or vanish. It's like she's auditioning for a role in a soap opera with that dramatic exit. After this riveting exchange, Azuma pulls a Houdini on Rinka and the gang, disappearing faster than your favorite TV show's plot twist. Meanwhile, the jewelry thief, who's clearly not ready to let go of the drama, insists on sticking around until she hears from Azuma, because nothing says commitment like hanging around in a high-stakes scenario just for a chat. So, she decides to do some detective work of her own. After rummaging through clues, she uncovers that Azuma is tangled up with the professor and Minami. Apparently, their family reunions are a lot more intense than the average holiday dinner. While chilling solo on the street, Azuma finds himself under attack by an Esper. But before Azuma can even think about defending himself, Rinka swoops in like a superhero in a convenience store, beating up the Esper with the finesse of someone who's had just enough of this nonsense. Post-beatdown, Rinka and Azuma decide to have a rooftop heart-to-heart, because clearly the roof is the go-to spot for deep, meaningful conversations. Azuma then goes all nostalgic, recalling how Minami once showed up at his door, sobbing like she'd just watched a really sad movie. Azuma's convinced that Minami must be under the professor's mind control, because obviously nobody does anything crazy without some external influence, right? So now he's planning to confront Minami. When Rinka agrees to help Azuma on his noble quest, he can't resist calling her a hero. Azuma then refreshes Rinka with a tale of his past, where he was ambushed by some local thugs. Most people walked by, pretending they were blind or possibly auditioning for a role in a passive observer documentary. Only Rinka, with her sense of misplaced heroism, decided to step in and clean house. Next up, Murasaki and her dad decide to drop by for a chat. Murasaki's dad, who's probably still reeling from the fact that his daughter now has superpowers, is as lost as a tourist without a map. He's got no clue what to do with Murasaki's newfound abilities. So naturally, Rinka and Azuma decide it's their job to explain the whole Esper thing. They give the classic rundown. Yes, we're superheroes with superpowers. No, we don't have capes. Yet. Murasaki then delivers the ultimate teenage plot twist by announcing she's not going back home. She's decided to hang out with Rinka and her crew. After a while, Murasaki's dad makes a dramatic return, bringing her luggage and, for added emotional impact, a ring that belonged to her mother. It's like the anime version of a tear-jerking family reunion scene. Thanks to Murasaki's psychometric powers, because clearly being able to see the past is the latest trendy superpower, she gets a first-time glimpse of her mother. Cue the waterworks as Murasaki weeps like she's just been handed a lifetime supply of chocolate. But just as things start to look up, the professor crashes the party. Most likely he felt it was the perfect timing to show up uninvited to a heartfelt moment. He decides to give Rinka and Murasaki a free trip to Crazy Town by making them hallucinate. In this psychedelic nightmare, he ominously warns Rinka that a catastrophe is on the horizon in a week's time. He's definitely a fan of melodramatic cliffhangers and overcomplicated threats. All that the jewelry thief, Kabushi, could say about the incident was, how come it was just the two of them that saw these things? She found it hard to believe because she was standing outside the whole time. So we flash back to a time when the professor decided to play superhero and swooped in on Azuma after his parents tragically kicked the bucket. Hey kid, your parents are gone, but how about I take you in and make your life just as complicated? And oh, look who's tagging along with the professor like a loyal puppy, Minami. She's there to witness this heartwarming act of parental heroism while silently preparing herself for the ensuing drama. Fast forward to school, where Minami is completely dazzled by Azuma's noble act of defending her from a gang of bullies. He was her knight in shining armor. Honestly, who knew bravery could come with so many bruises? Meanwhile, Rinka is stuck in a loop, obsessing over everything the professor said. It's like she's got a never-ending playlist of doom and gloom stuck in her head. And then, as if to make things more complicated, Azuma decides to casually drop that his parents were scientists. Because of course, who doesn't love a bit of science fiction mixed with their tragic backstory? Azuma is now on a quest to connect the dots between his parents' work and the bizarre stuff happening around him. It's like he's trying to piece together a jigsaw puzzle of his life, but all the pieces are from different puzzles and some are missing. The next day, the police decide to crash Rinka's family gathering, because what's a family dinner without a side of handcuffs? They've got a hot tip that Rinka is the infamous white-haired girl. Yeah, because no one ever thought to double-check that information before barging into someone's home. As if things weren't chaotic enough, a ship starts flying around the city. Because why stick to boring old police work when you can add a little sci-fi flair to your day? So, Rinka, Murasaki, and Urushiba find themselves in the back of a police vehicle, which is apparently the new VIP lounge for criminal masterminds. Urushiba, ever the doting parent, warns Rinka not to mess with the professor's issues. But Rinka, being the rebellious teenager she is, totally ignores the advice. Thanks to Murasaki's enthusiastic pep talk, she decides that escaping from the police car is just another fun weekend activity. Using her powers, she busts out like she's auditioning for a superhero movie. Rinka's life just turned into a high-speed chase with a side of parental disapproval. Enter Kobushi, the jewelry thief who must have missed the memo on subtlety. This lady makes his grand entrance with all the grace of a bull in a china shop. Azuma, being the teleporting hero he is, decides to drop in unannounced on the flying ship, because who needs a boring old door when you can teleport? Minami steps in, and it's like she's auditioning for the next top martial artist, as she takes down both Azuma and Kobushi with what can only be described as dazzling ease. Azuma ends up in a rather uncomfortable position, with a sword stuck through his hand. Nothing says "I'm in control" like being immobilized and pierced like a human kebab. Kobushi, meanwhile, takes a hit to the shoulder and takes a nosedive into a pool of her own blood. It's like the universe decided to give her a taste of her own disastrous medicine. Rinka and Penguin also appears. Rinka jumps into attack mode and she's ready to mix it up with the professor's team. The professor, ever the drama king, announces his master plan to drop the ship from the sky. Because why not add a bit of Game of Thrones flair to his villainous schemes? Rinka, channeling her inner superhero, vows to stop him, which basically translates to a high-stakes showdown. Minami, however, is not having any of it. She attacks Rinka with all the rage of someone who just discovered their favorite TV show was cancelled. Rinka gets knocked out and her body floats off the ship like a lost balloon. Now Azuma, still pinned and having a bad day, sees Rinka floating away. In a moment of classic heroism, or sheer desperation, he yanks his hand off the sword, making a break for Rinka like a drama queen chasing their last chance for a heroic moment. When Rinka finally comes to, she finds that her house has been converted into a disaster zone. She hurries over to Azuma, who in true heroic fashion, tells her to go save Kobushi instead. Rinka, still battered and bruised, drags Kobushi to some health officials who are probably thinking, "Why did we sign up for this job?" She hands over Kobushi like an unwanted package at the post office, and then rushes back to Azuma. When she returns, she's greeted by Minami, who's apparently taken up the role of Azuma's personal bodyguard, with plans to whisk him away. Rinka tries to intervene, but then reality hits her. There are injured people crying out for help. It's like a chaotic carnival where the rides are broken and everyone's yelling for help. Urushiba, Rinka's dad, arrives on the scene, and together they become the ultimate rescue duo, saving as many people as they can from the wreckage. It's like they've stepped into a live-action disaster movie, only with a lot more emotional baggage and fewer special effects. While Azuma is being debated over like a hot potato, Rinka and Urushiba are busy playing heroes in their own right. It's a day full of surprises, and none of them involve a quiet afternoon. Back in school, Rinka is preparing for an exam that she missed early. She is approached by some students. When they start talking about Azuma, Rinka quietly walks away. At home, Rinka spars with her father, who complains of her anger. A panda who had taught Urushiba all he knew about fighting appears. The panda had been observing everything from the sidelines, but now he wanted to help prepare them to face the professor and his evil crew. He offered to train Rinka and Murasaki to make them tougher. Elsewhere, the professor asks Minami if she regrets ever following him. Minami assures him that she will always be by his side. She returns to the room where Azuma is sleeping and offers him a drink. Azuma tries to leave the place but couldn't teleport himself out of the professor's place. Rinka and Murasaki have resumed their training with the panda, While sparring with Urushiba, Rinka had to learn how to fight at a close distance, while Murasaki had to master high psychometry powers. During Rinka's break time, Kabushi comes around to talk with her. Kabushi advises Rinka to stop being so moody about Azuma because it was affecting Urushiba negatively. She told Rinka that it is nice to be a part of her family. At home, Urushiba comes back from work and gives Rinka a special package containing Azuma's mask. Rinka returns back to the panda and asks him to train her from the beginning again. She had to be prepared to stop the professor the next time he attacked. The panda comes to the training ground with a new sparring partner for Rinka. The young boy with curls seemed to be unhappy about being Rinka's sparring partner and complained for a little before agreeing to fight her. Rinka spars with the young boy whose name is Ayumu but easily gets defeated. Rinka wonders how Ayumu is able to know her moves even before she attacks. She then decides to go after him to find out. Upon closer observation, Rinka concluded that Ayumu had the power of precognition, which means he could tell things a few minutes before they happened. With this new information, she knew she had to attack him with fast moves. Meanwhile, the panda urges Rinka to continue practicing until all the moves become second nature for her. Murasaki also practices her powers on cards and gets disappointed to find out that she could still not use her powers without touching the cards. Ayumu's mum is vehemently against the espers, and she discusses this with her son during mealtime. She had no idea that her son was an esper. In fact, one of her campaign strategies was to speak against the espers. In the next sparring session with Rinka, Ayumu noticed that her attitude towards him was different. Rinka wasn't treating the fight like a normal sparring session. She refused to attack first, and in all his premonition, he saw himself getting defeated. However, someone had to make the first move, and Ayumu decided to do so. Rinka countered all his moves and he ended with his back on the floor. Ayumu felt bad that a girl had beaten him in a fight and asked for a rematch. Murasaki then told him to fight with her instead. Ayumu thought that it would be an easy fight but was shocked a few minutes later. Back at the professor's place, Azuma keeps on trying to escape but fails each time. Minami reminds him that he is under her father's control. Azuma tells Minami that she had changed a lot over the years, but Minami responds by saying that he is the one that has changed. On the way home, Ayumu notices as his mother is campaigning against espers. He imagines how her reaction would be when she finds out that her son is one of them. Murasaki catches up with him and they both get into a chat. Murasaki informs Ayumu that she was going home to return the nunchucks she had used in defeating him. According to her, it was too overwhelming for her, and there was no way she could fight for long with it. While the pair were still talking, an esper with the power to control electricity attacks Ayumu's mother and attempts to kill her. Ayumu and Murasaki comes to her aid and delivers her from the esper's hands. When Ayumu's mum finally came to, she was sad that her son is an esper. She did not know how the world will take the news when they find out that all the while that she was preaching against espers, her son was one of them. Ayumu could not come outside to spar with Rinka and Murasaki, so that left her with having to spar with her dad. Due to the multiple destructions being carried out by espers in the city, many people are now against them. Murasaki, who was more concerned about Ayumu, asked the panda about him. The panda used his esper powers to check and found out that Murasaki was safe and busy reading in his room. Rinka's mind is totally consumed by thoughts of Azuma. In a rare moment of peace, she visits a park and daydreams about them enjoying a quiet day together, like a scene straight out of a cheesy romance movie. Just as she's lost in this idyllic fantasy, reality decides to crash the party. An esper decides it's a great time to show off their enthusiasm for murder. They're practically giddy at the prospect of causing some chaos. It's as if they've been waiting all day for the chance to ruin someone's peaceful park visit. But Rinka's not about to let this ruckus ruin her day. Emerging from the flames like a phoenix, or maybe just someone who had a really bad day, she confronts the esper and puts a stop to their killing spree. It's like she's the park's personal security detail, ensuring that everyone's day ends on a note of survival rather than disaster. Rinka apprehends the culprit and brings her before Panda, the police, and Murasaki. The penguin recovers the shinning fish inside of the esper. Seeing that her powers were now gone, the evil esper lady complains bitterly of how Rinka ruined her chances of meeting Professor. She had been told that the professor would be the leader of the new world. From this encounter, Rinka's team concludes that the professor and Minami were holding assassination tryouts to recruit people into their squad. Minami continues with the assassination tryouts by visiting strategic places around the city. She returns home to the professor and has a little chat with Azuma. She shares her dreams of building a new world where humans are under their rule. Azuma disagrees with her and tries to convince her that the human race still has hope. Murasaki takes out time to bake cookies for Ayumu and sends it to him through the penguin. Summer vacation is over and Rinka had to resume school. While driving her bicycle and remembering all the events that had happened in the past few months, she is a bit saddened. When Rinka raised her head, she saw Azuma far ahead. She was shocked and did not know what to say. She ran to hug him and they both walked down. Minami pays the school a visit with the new Esper recruits. They all enter the classrooms and start destroying. Rinka could not stand and watch the Espers. She attacked them but was overpowered. While this is going on, Minami remembers how badly she was treated by them before she became an Esper. She wanted to get revenge so badly, and now she had gotten the golden opportunity. Few months back, some boys from her school glad followed her and wanted to do something bad to her. It was at this point that the shinning fish came into her and she got the power to teleport. Azuma steps in to help Rinka, but is hypnotized. Rinka is beaten to the point of death, and when she stopped breathing for few seconds, the shinning fish swam out of her body. While all this is going on, the Espers are streaming it to all the TV channels. It was to serve as a warning to any other Esper who tries to get in their way. Meanwhile, instead of killing Azuma, Minami teleports him to an island. Azuma tries several times to leave but couldn't. The instructions of the professor was for her to kill Azuma, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. When everything finally died down, Rinka woke up in the hospital with things all over. It was even difficult for her to stand up. She looked around and couldn't find Azuma. Rinka panicked and told everyone that they needed to GK and save Azuma. She was surprised to learn that she had lost her powers. The door to her hospital bed was suddenly opened, and a new task force group steps in. They had been set up by the government to handle the Espers. The Esper task force were there to arrest Rinka and test the others for trace of Esper powers. Rinka and Murasaki successfully escapes, but Panda and Urushiba were captured by the Special Task Force. The Special Task Force group also attacks Rinka's home, but Kabushi was able to escape. Since all the places where they can hide had been spotted, Murasaki reached out to her father to come and pick them up. Before Murasaki's father would arrive, Rinka disappears because she didn't want to be a burden to them. We're back on the island, and Minami decides it's time for a dramatic revelation. She drops the bombshell that Rinka is dead. Naturally, Azuma, who is apparently auditioning for the role of angry young man, responds by yelling that Minami should have just killed him already. Minami, with the air of someone explaining why the sky is blue, explains that she didn't do it because she's apparently not a clone of her father. Minami claims that Azuma might have a change of heart when he learns why his parents died. It turns out the story he's been fed was about as true as a reality TV show wedding. It was all a lie spun by the professor, who, let's face it, should have been given an award for best screenplay and deception. Meanwhile, Rinka was on the run with no place to hide. It did not take long before she was apprehended by the authorities. Rinka had given up because she felt that Azuma was dead. Rinka is taken into the detention faculty where she meets with Sage and the other Espers. Most of them are against her because she used to attack them when they were outside. In a flashback, Azuma recalls how his parents had come home to inform him that they were moving to where their research was located. Few days later, he was taken to see the dead bodies of his parents. He never knew what really happened. Minami took some time to school him by going down memory lane. Their parents were involved in a particular research work together. They stumbled on an artifact which they believed to be the Ark of God. As regular researchers with a good heart, they reported their findings to the authorities, and a general came by himself to check it out. The general's reaction was not what they expected. He looked at the Ark with awe and wanted to explore its powers for himself. The general opened the Ark and brought out the tablets made of stones. One of the tablets fell from his hands, and a school of shinning fish swam out of it. Everyone that the fish passed through became unconscious and woke up in the hospital. Once again, they reported their findings to the general, and he came to meet them in the hospital. This time around, they had a backup plan. Azuma and Minami's parents had also called an ambassador from Japan. Thinking that they were now safe, they started making plans to return home. The ambassador called them on phone and told them to come over to the place where the artifacts were kept. On getting there, the general sent his men to shoot and kill all of them randomly. Then the 2 tablets were shared by the general and the ambassador. Somehow the professor managed to survive and went in search of answers. He went to meet with the ambassador, but before they could have any meaningful chat, the ambassador killed himself. The general was the only one remaining, so the professor went to him. He killed the general and collected the Ark. After hearing what really happened, Azuma didn't know how to react. However, when he remembered Rinka, he concluded that it was better if they do not kill humans. The special task force goes to the professor's home, but all they see there is an illusion. On the island, Azuma decides that it would be better for him to use a raft to leave the island. Whole speaking to himself, he overhears a voice at the background. At first, Azuma thought he had gone crazy. He looked around but could not find anybody. Then a big bird showed up. The bird offered to fly him out of the island if he would help it get a mate in the outside world. The bird also has the Esper powers, but wanted to experience love like Azuma and Rinka have. Ayumu escapes from home after his mother threatens to send him to the detention facility. In a meeting being held by the leaders of the nation at the National Diet Building, the professor infiltrates and holds them hostage. The scene goes back to the beginning as it was in episode 1, when the professor had just taken over the city. The building was hovering around the city while the professor was making his announcement. Meanwhile, the Espers are apparently auditioning for a role in World's Worst Neighbors, as they simultaneously target every corner of the city. One of the Esper girls, who's clearly taking her job very seriously, heads to the detention facility. She's like the worst kind of sales rep, trying to recruit the detainees with a pitch that's more convincing than a used car salesman on a Friday night. But guess what? The detainees are just not having it. It's almost as if they're saying, "Nah, we're good here." Enter Rinka, our resident action hero, who decides it's time for her "I'm gonna save the world" moment. She announces she's going to fight and take back the city. Urushiba, being the concerned parent, tries to stop her, because clearly a massive battle would be harmful. But Rinka, being the poster child for stubbornness, just brushes him off, knocks him down because why not, and runs off to confront the evil Espers. The other policeman, left by Inspector Nashirima, knelt down and pleaded with Urushiba to join them in the fight. Rinka fights against Espers, and when she looks up, she sees her father fighting alongside the police. Elsewhere, Murasaki and Ayumu freeze the penguin from the hold of the Espers that were holding it hostage. Kabushi also appears and suggests that they should all go to the National Diet Building. It seemed everyone there had a reason why they had to fly there, so they all agreed. Rinka and her crew are able to secure the hostages in the building. When the professor learns that Rinka and her team had arrived, he instructs those with him that it was time to leave. Minami tells the professor that she needs to go and kill the white-haired girl. The professor obliges her and leaves with the other Esper girl with him. During the epic showdown between Rinka and Minami, Rinka discovers that Azuma is still alive. Rinka's joy is so intense it's like she's won the lottery. They rally their forces and go full action hero on the professor's goons, managing to safely land the National Diet Building back on solid ground. It's like they've just defused the world's largest bomb, and everyone's expecting a round of applause. But wait, the National Diet Building was just a flashy decoy. It's like discovering that the giant cake you were so excited about was actually just a cardboard cutout. The professor's master plan involves spreading these shiny, annoying fish all over Tokyo using his magnetic field. It's as if he thought, why go for world domination when you can just make Tokyo look like a giant aquarium? Meanwhile, while Rinka's team was busy with the colossal distraction, the professor sneaked off to the Tokyo skytree. The clouds had changed to the color of the shinning fish. With the aid of the penguin, Rinka flies down to meet with the professor. On the way, she encounters the shinning fish and regains her Esper powers. Minami returns back to the professor and apologizes for not being able to kill Rinka. Before long, Rinka shows up and the professor tells her that he would be her opponent. He freezes her in a bubble and does the same thing to Kobushi. Azuma comes in at the right time to save the day. The professor ordered Minami to kill Azuma in his presence, but she could not bring herself to do it. When two new faces arrives, the professor announces that it was finally time. He tells the other Esper girl to take the Ark and Minami away. Rinka and her team also disappears.